The Nevada desert is a land of extremes, scorching heat by day, bone-chilling cold by night, and a wilderness where only the strongest survive. But even in this unforgiving place, some mysteries defy explanation. When a rescue team ventured into the heart of the desert after a brutal dust storm, they expected to find stranded wildlife seeking shelter. Instead, they found something no one could have prepared for. A dog, barely clinging to life, its body covered in strange, barnacle-like growths. And swarming around it? Bees. How had this creature survived in the desert for so long? Why did a wild dog stand guard over it, refusing to leave its side? And most unsettling of all, what secrets lay hidden beneath the shell that had trapped this animal in a living nightmare? As scientists and rescuers raced against time, they would uncover a story of resilience, an unbreakable bond, and a discovery that would change everything they thought they knew about survival in the wild. Rescue teams stunned upon finding a dog covered in barnacles and swarmed by bees. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly beneath the autumn sky, its vast emptiness broken only by the graceful movements of a small pack of wild dogs threading their way through the sage-dotted landscape. Among them, a young female named Luke stood out with her distinctive russet coat and amber eyes that seemed to hold the very essence of the wilderness within them. Her name, unusual for a female, had been whispered to her by the wind itself, or so the old stories of her pack claimed. The pack moved like a perfectly choreographed dance under the leadership of Shadow, their alpha, whose silver-gray coat rippled in the morning light. Luke had known no other life than this: the freedom of the open desert, the thrill of the hunt, and the unwavering loyalty of her family. At just 3 years old, she had already proven herself as one of the pack's most capable hunters, her lithe form perfectly adapted to the harsh desert environment. Dr. Sarah Coleman stood at the window of the Desert Wildlife Sanctuary's main building, her eyes scanning the horizon where the last reported sighting of the wild dog pack had been documented. As the lead veterinarian at the sanctuary, she had devoted her life to understanding and protecting the desert's most elusive inhabitants. The recent reports of an unusual creature in the area had brought her team to high alert. Dr. Coleman? A young voice broke through her thoughts. The satellite imagery just came in. Sarah turned to find Lily Martinez, her newest intern, clutching a tablet with trembling hands. At 16, Lily was younger than most interns, but her passion for wildlife rehabilitation had earned her a special placement at the sanctuary. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her eyes sparkled with the same enthusiasm that Sarah recognized from her own youth. "What have you found?" Sarah asked, taking the tablet. "There's something strange out there." Lily pointed to a cluster of pixels on the screen. "The thermal imaging shows a heat signature unlike anything we've seen before." Before Sarah could respond, the desert wind began to howl, its pitch rising to a banshee wail that made the windows shudder in their frames. The dust storm that had been predicted was arriving earlier than expected, and with it came a change that would alter the lives of everyone at the sanctuary. Miles away, Luke and her pack huddled together as the storm descended upon them. The air turned thick with sand, transforming the familiar landscape into an alien world of swirling particles and decreased visibility. Shadow's commanding bark ordered them to find shelter, but something caught Luke's attention. A strange scent carried on the wind, a mixture of salt water and something else, something that didn't belong in the desert at all. Despite Shadow's warnings, Luke followed the scent. Through the curtain of sand, she made out a shape that defied explanation. It was a dog, or what remained of one, its body almost completely covered in what appeared to be barnacles, hard, shell-like growths that shouldn't exist this far from the ocean. The creature was barely moving, and around it, impossibly, a swarm of bees danced in the wind, seeking shelter from the storm in the numerous crevices created by the barnacle-like growths. Luke's instincts warred within her, the pull to return to her pack versus the inexplicable need to help this strange creature. Before she could make a decision, the storm intensified, and the world disappeared in a cloud of choking dust. Miles away at the sanctuary, Sarah and her team prepared for emergency response. The dust storm's sudden intensity had triggered their protocols, and they knew that wildlife would be seeking shelter wherever they could find it. As they loaded their rescue vehicles with supplies, Lily noticed something on the thermal imaging feed. Dr. Coleman, 2 heat signatures, about 3 miles east. One of them's barely registering. Sarah made a quick decision. Gear up, everyone. We're going out. The rescue team's vehicles cut through the storm like ships through heavy seas, their specialized equipment allowing them to navigate despite the nearly zero visibility. Lily sat in the passenger seat beside Sarah, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. This was her first major rescue operation, and something told her it would be unlike anything they'd ever encountered. They found Luke first, standing guard over the barnacle-covered dog like a sentinel. The sight stopped even the most experienced members of the team in their tracks. The creature before them seemed more like something from the ocean depths than a desert inhabitant. The barnacle-like growths covered almost every inch of its body, creating a grotesque armor that must have weighed heavily on its frail frame. Despite the storm, bees continued to swarm around it, finding shelter in the countless nooks and crannies of its bizarre shell. "This is impossible," Sarah breathed, her scientific mind struggling to make sense of what she was seeing. "Barnacles need salt water to survive. We're hundreds of miles from the ocean," but there was no time for questions. The barnacle-covered dog was barely breathing, and Luke, though clearly wild, showed no signs of aggression as the team approached. If anything, she seemed to be pleading with them to help. The team worked quickly, using specialized tools to carefully begin removing the barnacle-like growths. As they worked, Sarah made a startling discovery. The growths weren't actually barnacles, but a rare form of hyperkeratosis, a condition that caused the dog's skin to grow out of control, creating hard, shell-like formations that mimicked marine life. The bees, displaced by the storm, had simply found convenient shelter in the formations. As they worked to save the dog they would later name Chance, Sarah noticed something else about Luke. Distinctive markings that identified her as a member of a rare subspecies of wild canid, one thought to be nearly extinct in this region. The decision to bring her back to the sanctuary was made with heavy hearts, knowing they were separating her from her pack, but believing it necessary for the preservation of her kind. The next few weeks at the sanctuary passed in a blur of activity. Chance, though weak, responded well to treatment. As the grotesque growths were carefully removed, a beautiful German shepherd emerged, his spirit unbroken despite the years of suffering he must have endured. The mystery of his origin deepened when they found a weathered collar beneath the growths, suggesting he had once been someone's beloved pet before becoming lost in the vast desert. Luke, however, struggled with captivity. Though housed in a spacious enclosure designed to mimic her natural habitat, she spent hours pacing its perimeter, her mournful howls echoing across the sanctuary grounds. It was Lily who first noticed the way Luke would stop her pacing whenever Chance was nearby, how her entire demeanor would change in his presence. "She saved him," Lily told Sarah one evening as they observed the 2 dogs interacting through the fence between their enclosures. "She could have left him to die in that storm, but she chose to stay. There's something special about her." Sarah nodded, watching as Luke pressed herself against the fence, whining softly as Chance limped closer to her. "The question is, what do we do now? She's too valuable to release. Her genetics could be crucial for the survival of her species. But keeping her here, it's killing her spirit," Lily finished softly. That night, unable to sleep, Lily began researching everything she could about Luke's pack. She reached out to wildlife photographers who had documented the pack's movements, studied satellite imagery of their territory, and began to form a plan. But she needed help. Enter James Harrison, a renowned wildlife photographer from Britain who had spent the last decade documenting the lives of wild canids across the American Southwest. When Lily reached out to him through the sanctuary's official channels, she didn't expect him to respond personally. But something in her passionate email caught his attention. "I remember that pack," he told them when he arrived at the sanctuary 2 weeks later, his weathered face creasing with smile lines as he reviewed his photographs. "They're unique. They've managed to adapt to human encroachment better than most, maintaining their territory despite the challenges. Their alpha, Shadow, is one of the most intelligent wild canids I've ever observed." As James shared his observations and photographs, a plan began to take shape. The pack hadn't left the area where Luke was separated from them. Instead, they had established a new pattern, their movements suggesting they were searching for their lost member. With James's help, they began to document the pack's movements more precisely, building a case for a controversial proposal. Sarah presented their findings to the sanctuary's board. Luke's pack showed unusual stability and success in their territory. Their hunting patterns were sustainable, their numbers healthy. Most importantly, they had demonstrated remarkable adaptability to human presence while maintaining their wild nature. The genetic diversity Luke carried would have a better chance of benefiting her species if she were allowed to return to her pack and breed naturally. The debate was intense, but in the end, science and compassion won out over caution. A plan was put in place to release Luke back into the wild, with conditions for monitoring and protection of the pack's territory. But before they could implement it, nature took matters into its own hands. One morning, as dawn broke over the desert, Shadow's distinctive howl echoed across the sanctuary grounds. The pack had found them. The sanctuary staff watched in amazement as the wild dogs appeared on a ridge overlooking the facility, their forms silhouetted against the rising sun. Luke's response was immediate and heart-wrenching, a howl of such pure joy and longing that it brought tears to Lily's eyes. The release was scheduled for the following day, but saying goodbye proved harder than anyone had anticipated. Luke had formed bonds here, especially with Chance and Lily. As they prepared to open her enclosure, Chance began to pace anxiously, his newly healed body carrying him back and forth along the fence line. "Wait," Lily said suddenly, her voice thick with emotion. "What about Chance? Look at them. They need each other." Sarah studied the two dogs thoughtfully. Chance had made remarkable progress in his rehabilitation, showing increasing confidence and strength. His hyperkeratosis was under control with treatment, but he would always need medical monitoring. Yet the bond between him and Luke was undeniable. It would be unprecedented, Sarah mused. A sanctuary dog joining a wild pack. But as they watched, Chance demonstrated exactly why it might work. When they opened Luke's enclosure, he was right there beside her, moving with a strength and grace they hadn't seen before. Together, they approached the pack, Luke leading the way while Chance held back slightly, showing appropriate deference to Shadow. The next few minutes held the sanctuary staff spellbound. Shadow approached the pair, his bearing regal and intimidating. Luke submitted immediately, but it was Chance's behavior that amazed them. He dropped to his belly, crawling forward with perfect canine etiquette, his body language speaking volumes in a language as old as time itself. To everyone's amazement, Shadow accepted both of them. As the pack prepared to leave, Luke did something unexpected. She broke away from the group and ran back to where Lily stood with tears streaming down her face. The wild dog pressed against the young girl's legs briefly, allowing one last pat, one final goodbye. Then she returned to Chance's side, and together they loped away with the pack, disappearing into the desert landscape they would now both call home. But the story didn't end there. Over the following months, the sanctuary staff regularly spotted the pack near their boundaries, always maintaining a safe distance but never showing aggression. Chance appeared to be thriving in his new life, his need for medical treatment managed during carefully planned visits that the pack seemed to understand and accept. Luke had found her balance between two worlds, wild and free, but choosing to maintain a connection with those who had helped her. For Lily, who had started her internship hoping to make a difference in animals' lives, the experience changed everything. She went on to study wildlife biology, eventually returning to the sanctuary as a full-fledged researcher. Her paper on the successful integration of a rehabilitated domestic dog into a wild canid pack became a landmark study in wildlife rehabilitation. And on quiet evenings, when the desert wind carries the sound of distant howls to the sanctuary, those who know the story smile, remembering the extraordinary events that began with a dust storm and a dog covered in barnacles. They think of Luke and Chance, running free with their pack across the desert, living proof that sometimes the most beautiful relationships grow from the most unlikely beginnings. The sanctuary now hosts educational programs about wild canids, using Luke and Chance's story to teach about conservation, compassion, and the incredible adaptability of both animals and humans. Their story reminds us that in nature, as in life, the bonds we forge in times of hardship often become our greatest strength. And sometimes, on very special mornings, visitors to the sanctuary might catch a glimpse of a russet-coated wild dog playing with a German shepherd at the edge of the desert. Their joy in each other's company a testament to the enduring power of friendship, loyalty, and love. The Desert Wildlife Sanctuary continues its vital work, but something fundamental changed after Luke and Chance's story. The staff learned that sometimes the best care we can offer isn't about keeping and protecting, but about having the courage to let go and trust in the wisdom of both nature and our own hearts. As for the mystery of Chance's barnacle-like condition and his origins, they were eventually solved when his original family was located through his weathered collar. He had been lost during a camping trip 2 years earlier, his hyperkeratosis developing as he struggled to survive in the harsh desert environment. His family, though overjoyed to learn he was alive, understood that he had found a new purpose and family in the desert, and they supported the sanctuary's decision to let him stay with the pack. Today, the story of the dog covered in barnacles and the wild dog who saved him has become legend in the wildlife rehabilitation community. It stands as a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary rehabilitation stories don't end with a return to domestic life, but with the discovery of a whole new way of living. One that bridges the gap between the wild and the tame, between what we think is possible and what actually is. And somewhere in the Nevada desert, a pack of wild dogs runs beneath the endless sky, led by a silver-gray alpha, accompanied by a russet-coated female and a German shepherd who learned that sometimes home isn't a place at all. It's wherever your family is, whether they're bound to you by blood or by the unbreakable bonds of the heart.